The Atlanta Hawks were the most surprising team in the league last season, and they pulled off one of the most unlikely runs to the Eastern Conference Finals. Atlanta was the topic of discussion almost every week during the playoffs, as Trae Young became one of the NBA's hottest players. The 2021 NBA playoffs were the moment where Trae Young became a superstar in this league, with not only his impact on the court, but he also embraced being the villain, and he welcomed the spotlight. You could argue that the Atlanta Hawks just had their best season ever since moving to Atlanta in 1968. Big improvements were expected with this team going into last season. The Hawks made big moves in the offseason in 2020, and they put more pressure on themselves as an organization to be a contender for the playoffs. They spent big money in free agency as they added guard Bogdan Bogdanovic and forward Danilo Gallinari. The team also drafted promising rookie Onyeka Okongwu and traded for Lou Williams at the trade deadline. This team was poised to make a big splash in the Eastern Conference this past season. Remember, this team only won 20 games the previous year. They weren't even invited to the NBA bubble when the league resumed the season in 2020. That's how disappointing they were despite the talent they had on the team. And at the beginning of the 2021 season, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for the Hawks. Early on, it was looking like this team was once again destined to find itself near the bottom of the Eastern Conference for the fourth consecutive season. Under then head coach Lloyd Pierce, the Hawks were struggling with a sub-500 record at the midpoint of their schedule. Sitting in the 11th place in the Eastern Conference with a 14-20 record, this team needed a reset. On March 1st, the Hawks got the change they needed. After firing Lloyd Pierce, the team promoted assistant coach Nate McMillan to interim head coach. It was the turning point of the season for the Hawks. McMillan has been known to get the best out of his players, at least in the regular season. His game plan was focused on pick and rolls and ball movement that allowed their shooters to spot up in the corner. They responded positively to McMillan's approach, and they went 27-11 the rest of the way and finished 5th in the Eastern Conference. The team's superstar Trae Young became a much more effective offensive player after Lloyd Pierce got fired. Young's scoring average and field goal attempts slightly dipped, but his field goal percentage and true shooting percentage improved. Since McMillan took over, the Hawks raised their offensive rating with Young on the court from 115 to 121. And their net rating with him on the court went from plus 2.5 to plus 8.2. Trae Young is absolutely fearless, and he's one of the most confident players in the league, and he has no problem letting you know about it. He established himself as one of the best trash talkers in the league. That became immediately noticeable under the bright lights in the playoffs. His talent has been undeniable as his confidence. And last season he took the Hawks to a level the franchise haven't seen in a long time. Trae Young is the number one focus for every opposing team when they come to play the Hawks, but he still finds a way to dominate the game, either as a passer or a scorer, the mark of a great player. And now he has postseason experience and success to his name, and he's only 22 years old. His potential hasn't been reached just yet, and that's scary for the rest of the league. Even though big man Clint Capella was acquired during the 2019-2020 season, he didn't hit the floor for the Hawks until this past season. His presence on the court gave the Hawks a defensive anchor they have needed for a while. Before he made his debut with the Hawks, this team was not exactly known for their defense. Their game plan was try to outscore their opponents rather than trying to stop them. That's why Capella's acquisition was very important for the rise of the Atlanta Hawks. He was a dominant force in the paint. This team was ranked in the bottom 5 in defensive rating and opponents' points per game in the last 2 seasons prior to last season. Capella helped turn this team from one of the worst defensive teams in the league to at least an average defensive team. And with an explosive offense that the Hawks have, an average defense is really all they need. Capella averaged 2 blocks per game on the season and also averaged 14 rebounds, and he led the league in that category. Players like Bogdanovic, Gallinari, and Lou Williams brought that playoff experience to this young team and were able to bring reliable production throughout the season. This was a team that really didn't need to make big changes this past offseason. Their number one priority was to retain some of the pieces they already had. One of those pieces was interim head coach Nate McMillan. This was literally a no-brainer. There's no way you hire another coach after the difference McMillan made with this team. I mean, the improvement was obvious. This team was 6 games under 500 when he took over at the beginning of March. And like I said earlier, they went 27-11 the rest of the way, and he helped lead this team to the Eastern Conference Finals. They won games 70% of the time when he took over with 38 games in the regular season. If he had coached for a full season, this team could have won at least 50 games in a 72-game schedule. Of course, the Hawks hired him as a full-time head coach, making him the 14th full-time head coach in franchise history. McMillan became the 3rd coach in the last 40 years to lead his team to the Eastern Conference Finals after taking over during the season. And the other important piece was power forward John Collins, who came into this summer as a restricted free agent. There may have been a little hesitation on both sides initially, but they eventually agreed to a 5-year, $125 million contract with a player option after the 4th year. The addition of Capella and Bogdanović were probably the main reason why his scoring and rebounding were down compared to previous years. But Collins was still that same consistent and reliable player he has always been. He went from 21 points per game on 15 field goal attempts to just over 17 points per game on 12 field goal attempts. And his rebounding went down from 10 rebounds per game to 7 rebounds. When you're playing alongside a player like Capella, your rebounding numbers are bound to go down automatically. But Collins has improved on defense from previous years, and his rebounding effort has always been there. And his floor spacing at the big man position is always valuable. After locking up Trae Young and John Collins with big contracts, it will be an interesting year coming up with the rest of the young core. Kevin Huerter, DeAndre Hunter, and Cam Reddish have all showed promise over the last couple of years. But injuries have kept these guys off the court from time to time in their short NBA careers. Now, Kevin Huerter really showed his worth in the playoffs. Like his draft classmate Trae Young, Huerter was not fazed by the bright lights of the playoffs. He was confident, he was decisive, and he made plays. While Trae Young was having a bad game in Game 7 against the 76ers, it was Huerter who took it upon himself to lead this team. He scored a playoff career-high 27 points on 10 of 18 shooting as the Atlanta Hawks took down the 76ers 103-96. In a game that had Joel Embiid, Trae Young, and Ben Simmons, it was Huerter who was the player of the game. The draft class of 2018 is eligible for rookie extensions right now, and Huerter was part of that class. The Hawks could sign him before the season, or they might wait to re-sign him next summer when he becomes a restricted free agent. This is a great problem to have. You would love to be able to keep all 3 of these guys when the time comes, but that's probably unrealistic. Young and Collins are locked in on long-term contracts, and veterans Bogdanović, Gallinari, and Capella are on big contracts. As a matter of fact, Capella just signed an extension for 2 years worth $46 million. Which is more evidence that the Hawks will have to make a tough decision down the road. I believe the Hawks will be forced to choose to resign 2 of the 3 young guys, Huerter, Reddish, and Hunter. That's why this year is important for the Hawks to decide which of these guys is worth keeping, specifically Reddish and Hunter. Both players have flashed 3-and-D potential, but they have been sidelined with injuries quite often. When DeAndre was healthy and playing at the beginning of the playoffs, Reddish was out. And when Hunter went down with an injury, Reddish had came back. At this point, the decision might come down to which player can stay healthy next season. This team is so deep with young talent that there might not be enough money to go around for everybody. And then you have the new guys coming in from this year's draft class, Jalen Johnson and Sharif Cooper. It's an embarrassment of riches for the Hawks, which is a good thing. Trae Young is not going to be satisfied with last season's success. He wants more. And with Nate McMillan as the head coach, this team will be a force to be reckoned with for years to come. I have the Atlanta Hawks finishing with the 3rd seed with a 54-28 record. There will be no complacency with this team. They have the veterans and the head coach to keep them focused and motivated. DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish healthy will make this team even more dangerous than they were last season. McMillan will have a full season with this team, and they have a great chance to win 50 games in the season for the first time since 2015. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, do it right now for future NBA content.